The first time Luke Granger saw the woman who answered his ad for a wife, she was hanging upside down from a runaway horse with one hand gripping the saddle horn and the other clutching a rifle. And somehow, she still looked calmer than the men chasing her. Dust exploded across the prairie as the black stallion thundered toward the train depot outside of Cheyenne. Townsfolk screamed and scattered. A pair of ranch hands dove behind a water trough. The horse leapt over 2 crates and nearly crashed into the station porch. Luke stepped forward instinctively, boots planted wide. Then the woman did something no one expected. Still hanging sideways from the saddle, she whistled once, sharp and commanding. The stallion stopped so hard dirt sprayed across the platform like rain. She swung herself upright in one smooth motion and pulled the horse into a perfect circle before dismounting. The entire depot fell silent. The woman adjusted her hat, brushed dust from her brown coat, and looked directly at Luke. "You the fool asking for a wife who can ride." A few men nearby burst into laughter. Luke didn't. He stared at her in stunned silence. Tall, lean, sun-browned skin, dark braid hanging over one shoulder. A scar cut faintly across her jawline. Her eyes were gray and steady like approaching rain. And standing beside that snorting stallion, she looked less like a mail-order bride and more like the kind of woman legends warned men about. Luke folded the newspaper clipping in his hand. Wanted. A hard-working wife for ranch life. Must know horses. Must not fear hard country. He cleared his throat. Name's Luke Granger. She held out her hand. Evelyn Shaw. The moment their hands touched, Luke noticed 2 things. First, her grip was stronger than most cowboys. Second, she carried pain in her eyes so deep it looked buried alive. And though he didn't know it then, Evelyn Shaw was about to change not only his ranch, but his entire life. Luke's ranch sat 3 days west of town near the foothills, where the land turned wild and unforgiving. Most women who answered ranch advertisements lasted less than a week. Some hated the isolation, others feared the storms, a few simply couldn't handle the work. Luke never blamed them. Ranch life was brutal even for men. But he needed help desperately. After losing his younger brother to fever the previous winter, the ranch had begun falling apart. Fences needed repair, cattle were disappearing, debt hung over him like a storm cloud. And loneliness. Loneliness had become the heaviest burden of all. The ride home should have taken 4 quiet days. Instead, Evelyn made certain Luke remembered every mile. On the second morning, she outran him before sunrise. Luke awoke to hoofbeats and stepped outside the chuck wagon to find her black stallion racing along the ridge like smoke across the hills. She leaned low over the saddle, guiding the horse effortlessly across rocky ground most riders avoided. His ranch hand, Walter, spat tobacco into the dirt and muttered, "Good Lord, she rides like the devil himself taught her." Luke almost agreed. When Evelyn returned, her horse barely breathing hard, she slid off the saddle. "Your eastern fence line's broken 2 miles ahead," she said casually. "Tracks too. 3 riders passed through recently." Luke frowned. "You rode that far already." "I sleep light." Walter stared openly now. "Ma'am, where exactly did you learn to ride like that?" Evelyn tightened the horse's cinch. "From people meaner than horses." She said it quietly. Too quietly. And for the first time, Luke noticed how she avoided questions about her past. That night, rain hammered the camp while thunder rolled across the plains. Walter snored beside the fire, but Luke couldn't sleep. He found Evelyn sitting beneath the wagon awning sharpening a hunting knife. "You always carry that thing?" he asked. She didn't look up. "Always. Expecting trouble. Trouble usually finds me first." Luke sat beside her, careful not to crowd. For a while, only rain spoke between them. Then she asked, "Why'd you really place the advertisement?" Luke stared into darkness. "Because I got tired of eating burnt beans alone." She laughed unexpectedly, a real laugh, rough around the edges but genuine. It transformed her face completely. And Luke realized then that Evelyn Shaw had probably forgotten how beautiful happiness could make her look. "My brother used to keep this place alive," Luke admitted softly. "After he died, everything just got quiet." Evelyn stopped sharpening the knife. "I know about quiet," she whispered. Luke waited for more. None came. By the time they reached the ranch, word had already spread about Luke's unusual bride-to-be. Cowboys gathered outside the barn pretending to work while secretly staring at Evelyn. Most expected a timid woman from back east. Instead they got a rider who could outshoot half of them. The trouble started almost immediately. Clyde Mercer rode onto the property 2 days later with 6 men behind him. Clyde owned the neighboring ranch, and hated Luke for refusing to sell his land. He smiled when he spotted Evelyn repairing fence posts. "Well now," Clyde sneered. "Didn't know Granger started hiring circus performers." His men laughed. Evelyn didn't even look up from the hammer in her hand. Luke stepped forward. "What do you want, Clyde?" "Missing cattle wandered onto my land." "That's a lie and you know it." Clyde shrugged. "Maybe. But hard winters make desperate men do foolish things." The threat hung clear in the air. Then Clyde's eyes shifted back toward Evelyn. "You sure that's a woman and not some outlaw dressed fancy?" One of the ranch hands chuckled nervously. That was his mistake. Before anyone saw her move, Evelyn snatched a revolver from the nearest saddle holster, spun, and fired. Bang! A tin can exploded off the fence post beside Clyde's head. His horse reared violently. Silence crashed across the ranch. Evelyn calmly handed the revolver back. "If I aimed at his head," she said coldly, "he'd be dead already." Even Luke stood speechless. Clyde's face burned red with humiliation. "This ain't over," he growled before riding off. Walter slowly exhaled. "Luke, where in heaven did you find this woman?" Luke looked toward Evelyn. She had already returned to fixing the fence as though nothing happened. "I'm starting to wonder that myself." Days turned into weeks. Then something unexpected happened. The ranch began to live again. Evelyn worked harder than any man there. She broke wild horses, repaired saddles, helped deliver calves during freezing nights. And somehow, she still found time to sit beside old Mrs. Baxter from the neighboring homestead when arthritis kept the widow bedridden. But what amazed Luke most wasn't her strength. It was her kindness. Because beneath the scars and silence, Evelyn noticed every lonely soul around her. She left extra blankets outside bunkhouses during cold nights. She secretly repaired Walter's late wife's rocking chair after hearing him mention it once. And when Luke woke from nightmares about his brother, she never asked questions. She simply sat beside him until morning came. Little by little, the walls around Luke's heart began breaking apart. Then came the fire. It started near the north pasture just after midnight. By the time the alarm spread, flames were tearing across dry grass with terrifying speed. Wind drove the blaze straight toward the horse barn. Men shouted frantically. Horses screamed inside the smoke. Luke grabbed buckets, but Evelyn was already moving. She vaulted onto her black stallion bareback and rode directly into the fire. "Evelyn!" Luke shouted. The heat was monstrous. Sparks swirled like demons through darkness. One collapsing beam nearly crushed her as she forced open the barn doors. Then the impossible happened. One by one, terrified horses began following her voice through the smoke. She rode through flames 3 separate times, rescuing trapped animals while ranch hands watched in disbelief. By dawn, the fire was finally contained. The barn stood blackened, but every horse survived. Evelyn sat alone near the water trough afterward, coughing from smoke. Luke approached quietly. "You could have died." She stared toward the horizon. "I've almost died before." "Who hurt you, Evelyn?" For a long time, she said nothing. Then finally, "My husband." Luke froze. "He drank," she continued quietly. "Gambled. Lost everything. One night he sold my horse for whiskey money. When I tried to stop him," she touched the scar on her jaw. Luke's fists clenched. "He started beating me regularly after that. Said a woman should obey." Her voice remained calm, which somehow made it worse. "One winter he lost a card game to outlaw riders. Tried offering me as payment." Luke felt sick. "What happened?" Evelyn's gray eyes hardened like steel. "I escaped. The wind moved softly across the prairie. He came after me for 2 years," she whispered. "That's why I learned to shoot. Learned to ride fast. Learned never to stay anywhere long." Luke sat beside her carefully. "You're safe here." Evelyn looked at him then, not with toughness or caution, but with something fragile. Something frightened. "You can't promise that." Unfortunately, she was right. 3 nights later, riders came. Luke woke to barking dogs and hoofbeats. 6 armed men surrounded the ranch house. At their center sat a heavy-set man with cruel eyes and whiskey-flushed skin. Evelyn went pale instantly. "Harold." Luke understood immediately. Her husband smiled slowly. "Found you at last." Ranch hands grabbed rifles. Tension snapped across the yard. Harold dismounted unsteadily. "Wife belongs with her husband." "I'd rather die," Evelyn said. Harold laughed. You always were dramatic. Luke stepped forward. She's not going anywhere. Harold's expression darkened. This ain't your business. The hell it isn't. For one dangerous second, nobody moved. Then Harold drew first. Gunfire exploded. Chaos erupted across the ranch yard. Horses screamed. Men dove behind wagons. Walter fired from the barn roof while Luke exchanged shots beside the water trough. But in the middle of the violence stood Evelyn. Still, calm, like she'd lived this moment 1,000 times before. Harold aimed toward Luke. Evelyn saw it first. She fired once. The bullet struck Harold's revolver clean from his hand. Before anyone recovered, she spurred her stallion forward and rode straight at him. It was the wildest thing Luke had ever seen. She leaned low as the horse slammed into Harold's chest, knocking him flat into dirt. His men scattered immediately, fleeing under rifle fire from the ranch hands. Within moments, silence returned. Harold groaned beneath the horse's hooves. Evelyn aimed her revolver at him steadily. Everyone waited. After everything he'd done, no one would have blamed her. But slowly, she lowered the gun. I'm done running from you, she said. Sheriff deputies arrived by sunrise. As they dragged Harold away in chains, he screamed curses into the morning air. Evelyn never watched him leave. Instead, she stood beside the corral trembling quietly. Not from fear, from release. Luke approached her carefully. It's over. For the first time since arriving at the ranch, Evelyn began to cry. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just years of buried pain finally breaking free. Luke wrapped his arms around her, and she collapsed against his chest beneath the rising Wyoming sun. Months later, spring painted the ranch green again. The fences stood repaired. Cattle numbers recovered. Laughter returned to the bunkhouse. And at the center of it all was Evelyn. The woman everyone once doubted had become the soul of the ranch itself. One evening, the ranch hands gathered for a horse race across the valley. Cowboys lined up confidently beside their fastest mounts. Walter grinned at Luke. Your wife's about to embarrass every man here. Luke smiled proudly. Again, Evelyn mounted her black stallion and tipped her hat. The race began with a thunder of hooves. Dust rolled across the plains. For several glorious minutes riders battled neck and neck over hills and creek beds. Then Evelyn pulled ahead. Not by luck, not by chance, but because nobody alive rode like she did. She crossed the finish line nearly 10 lengths ahead of everyone else. The ranch erupted into cheers and laughter. Luke watched her from the fence, heart full. Because somewhere between loneliness and loss, between fire and fear, two broken people had found something worth fighting for. That night, beneath a sky blazing with stars, Evelyn rested beside Luke on the porch. You know, she said softly, when I answered your advertisement, I almost turned back twice. Luke smiled. Why didn't you? She leaned against him gently. Because for the first time in years, I wanted to believe there might still be good men left in this world. Luke kissed her forehead. Far out in the pasture, horses moved peacefully beneath moonlight. And for the first time in a very long time, Evelyn Shaw finally stopped looking over her shoulder. Sometimes the strongest people are not the ones who never break. They are the ones who survive what should have destroyed them, and still choose kindness afterward. And sometimes, the right person doesn't arrive to be rescued. Sometimes, they arrive to save everyone else.